You're standing in the bedchamber of Louis XIV, the Sun King himself, and you notice something that makes your stomach turn. There's a crowd of at least 40 nobles packed into this room, and they're all watching the king sit on his throne. Except it's not a throne. It's a toilet. A velvet-cushioned, gold-trimmed contraption where His Majesty is actively relieving himself while discussing military strategy with his generals, flirting with mistresses, and signing death warrants. The smell is absolutely rancid, but nobody flinches. In fact, there's a waiting list to be here. Courtiers have literally bribed officials for the privilege of watching the king defecate. Welcome to the Chair of Ease ceremony, where the most powerful man in Europe turned his morning bowel movement into a status symbol, and if you think that's disturbing, wait until you hear what happened to the servants who had to carry that chair afterward. This isn't a joke from a comedy sketch. This was daily life at Versailles, and what I am about to tell you will make you realize that royal courts weren't palaces of elegance and refinement. They were cesspits of biological horror disguised in silk and powder. Let's talk about what actually happened during these toilet audiences, because the reality is so much worse than you're imagining. The Chair of Ease wasn't some discreet private moment. It was theater. Louis XIV believed that every single aspect of his life, including his bodily functions, was a demonstration of divine authority. When God's representative on earth takes a shit, it's not just waste leaving a body. It's a sacred act that lesser mortals should feel honored to witness. The chair itself was an engineering marvel of grotesque luxury, upholstered in crimson velvet with gold embroidery, equipped with a removable porcelain bowl underneath, and positioned in the center of the room where everyone had a perfect view. The king would sit there, sometimes for an hour or more, because 17th century French cuisine absolutely destroyed royal intestines, conducting the business of state while his bowels conducted their own business. Ambassadors from foreign nations would present their credentials while trying not to gag. Military officers would receive their orders while the unmistakable sounds of royal digestion echoed off marble walls. And the entire time, a servant stood directly behind the king, holding a basin of perfumed water and a cloth, ready to assist with cleanup the moment His Majesty finished. But here's where it gets truly nightmarish. That servant, the one tasked with wiping the royal posterior, wasn't just some random palace worker. This was actually a sought-after position called the groom of the stool, and it came with significant political power. Why? Because you had daily private access to the king's most vulnerable moments. You could whisper advice while he was indisposed. You could read his mood based on the state of his bowels. You knew when he was sick, stressed, or physically weakened before anyone else in the kingdom. Several grooms of the stool became immensely wealthy and influential, all because they'd mastered the art of political networking while handling soiled royal undergarments. And the competition for this job was fierce. Noble families would scheme for generations to get one of their sons appointed to wipe the king's ass, because that's what power looked like in the age of absolute monarchy. You think modern political corruption is bad? At least contemporary politicians pretend their backroom deals happen in actual rooms, not while they're literally sitting on a toilet in front of an audience. Now let's discuss what happened after the ceremony concluded, because this is where the true horror of palace hygiene becomes apparent. That porcelain bowl containing the king's waste? It had to be carried through the palace, not through secret passages or hidden corridors. Through the main halls, past courtiers, past servants setting tables for lunch, past ladies in their finest gowns. The servant assigned to this task, called the groom of the night stool, because apparently they needed a separate title for the nighttime waste removal, would carry this sloshing container at arm's length while trying to walk fast enough to minimize the spreading stench, but not so fast that anything spilled. And spillage was a constant problem. The Palace of Versailles, that architectural wonder that tourists flock to today, was essentially a giant toilet without proper plumbing. There were over 10,000 people living there at any given time. Nobles, servants, guards, visitors, all producing waste, and the palace had exactly 0 toilets as we understand them. Instead, there were close to 300 portable chairs scattered throughout the building, plus countless chamber pots, all producing gallons of human excrement that had to be manually carried to disposal points. The disposal system itself was absolutely demented. Servants would carry waste to designated areas, often just outside windows on the ground floor, where they dump it into open pits called cesspools. These pits were supposed to be emptied regularly by waste collectors, but the sheer volume of material being produced meant they constantly overflowed. During heavy rains, the contents would flood back into the palace through ground-level doors and windows. Visitors to Versailles routinely wrote in their diaries about the overwhelming smell, describing it as a mixture of perfume, trying desperately to mask the underlying stench of decay. One German duchess visiting in 1683 wrote that she nearly vomited during a ball because beneath the scent of orange, blossoms and rosewater, you could distinctly smell that the palace foundations were essentially marinating in centuries of accumulated human waste. But the chair of ease ceremony wasn't even the most disturbing bathroom-related practice at European courts. Let me introduce you to the concept of public urination as a power move. In the court of Louis XV, the king's grandson and successor, nobles began competing to see who could demonstrate the most casual disregard for basic sanitation while maintaining aristocratic composure. Men would openly urinate into fireplaces during parties, aiming their streams into the flames while continuing conversations about philosophy and art. Women, constrained by their massive gowns and corsets, developed an even more disturbing solution. They wore specialized undergarments with strategic openings and would simply urinate while standing in crowded rooms, their enormous skirts hiding the act while streams of urine soaked into the wooden floors beneath them. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't emergency relief. This was deliberate performance of status. The message was clear. I am so far above you that I don't even need to excuse myself to perform basic bodily functions. The palace will simply absorb my waste because that is what lesser things do in the presence of nobility. The wooden floors of Versailles tell their own story of accumulated horror. Modern restoration teams have discovered that the original flooring in many rooms had to be completely replaced multiple times throughout the palace's active years because it had become so saturated with urine that it was rotting from the inside out. Chemical analysis of preserved wood samples shows not just human waste, but also traces of mercury, lead, and other toxic substances that were common in cosmetics and medicines of the era, all of which was being absorbed into the very structure of the building. The palace was literally decomposing from the biological assault of its inhabitants, turning into a spectacular monument built on a foundation of slowly liquefying filth. And nobody seemed to care. Or rather, caring about it would mean admitting that aristocrats were subject to the same gross biological processes as peasants, which was ideologically impossible. So instead, they just poured more perfume, burned more incense, and pretended the smell of rotting human waste was somehow compatible with divine right monarchy. The servants who maintained this nightmare system developed their own hierarchy of horror. The lowest position wasn't actually the one carrying chamber pots. It was worse. There was a specialized role called the keeper of the royal close stool room, whose job was to clean, maintain, and store all the portable toilets used by the royal family. This meant spending 8 to 10 hours per day in a room filled with dozens of used toilet chairs, scrubbing porcelain bowls with sand and vinegar, replacing soiled velvet cushions, and occasionally dealing with what historians delicately refer to as overflow incidents. The smell in this room was so overpowering that workers would stuff their nostrils with cloth soaked in camphor just to breathe, and they'd still develop chronic respiratory problems. Many went partially blind from the ammonia fumes. Several historical records mention servants in this role developing permanent olfactory damage, losing their sense of smell entirely, which the palace administrators considered a benefit because it meant they could work longer hours without complaining. But here's the absolutely insane part that reveals how twisted the logic of royal courts truly was. Despite the astronomical health risks, despite the degrading nature of the work, these positions were still considered prestigious compared to alternatives because they came with room and board inside the palace walls. There were waiting lists of desperate people hoping to land these jobs because the alternatives, starvation, homelessness, being pressed into military service, or even worse. The Palace of Versailles, with its literally toxic atmosphere and its systematic degradation of human dignity, was still seen as a better option than life outside its walls. Think about what that tells you about the state of society in absolutist France. The king sits on a golden toilet, while 40 nobles watch and applaud servants. Carry buckets of royal shit through ballrooms. The floors are rotting from accumulated urine. Workers are going blind from cleaning up after aristocrats, who piss into fireplaces for fun. And this entire system is considered the pinnacle of civilization. This is what people mean when they talk about the splendor of Versailles. This Baroque nightmare of biological horror wrapped in silk. And it wasn't unique to France. Every major European court operated under similar conditions with minor variations. The English royal court had its own groom of the stool, who wielded considerable political influence through fecal proximity to power. The Spanish court at the Escorial had a system of underground tunnels specifically designed for waste removal. It frequently flooded, creating a literal river of shit flowing beneath the throne room. The Austrian Habsburgs at Schönbrunn Palace developed elaborate etiquette rules about which nobles were allowed to use which toilet chairs, based on blood proximity to the emperor, creating a hierarchy where your social status could be measured by the quality of the furniture you were permitted to defecate on. These weren't primitive medieval castles. These were the most advanced civilizations on Earth during the Age of Enlightenment, and they were all operating under the same basic principle. If you have enough power, basic sanitation is optional. The chair of ease finally fell out of fashion, not because anyone realized how insane it was, but because the French Revolution happened, and suddenly conducting state business while taking a dump seemed like exactly the kind of aristocratic excess that justified guillotines. The revolutionaries who stormed Versailles found rooms full of ornate toilet chairs and used them as kindling for bonfires, which seems symbolically appropriate. But the mindset that created the chair of ease never really disappeared. It just evolved. Today, we don't watch billionaires use the bathroom, but we do watch them conduct business on private jets while crossing oceans. We don't carry their chamber pots, but we do structure entire economies around servicing their needs. The chair of ease was never really about toilets. It was about power, about creating a world where some people are so elevated that normal rules, including the basic dignity of private defecation, simply don't apply to them. And if you think we've moved past that, you're not paying attention. We just got better at hiding the smell.